Left-wing violence in the Trump era, 2017. A depiction of Donald Trump being stabbed to death play acted out in New York City's Free Shakespeare in the Park, staged in New York's public parks system at public expense. The following is a list of left-wing violence in the Trump era during 2017, this being a subpage whose information was moved here from the main content page. January 2017. A Twitter engineer tweet 3 days after President Trump's first inauguration. 1. At least 217 violent protesters were arrested in Washington, D.C. on President Trump's inauguration day. 2-3. Democrat vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine appeared on MSNBC calling for members of his party to fight in Congress, fight in the courts, fight in the streets, fight online, fight at the ballot box. 4. 4 Chicago gangstas were charged with hate crimes for kidnapping and beating a mentally disabled white student in live streaming video on Facebook, forcing the victim to repeat anti-Trump taunts. 5. Madonna, a person with the economic resources to pose a viable threat, publicly stated, "I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House." 6. The Secret Service decided to investigate her due to her threat. 7. She claimed the comment was a metaphor. 8. Pro-Trump demonstrator knocked out at protest. 9. A Trump supporter was attacked after putting out a fire started by anti-Trump protesters. When Trump protesters encountered a driver with a pro-Trump flag on his car, they surrounded the vehicle, ripped off and began burning the flag, and pounded the car. They also punctured on the tires. February 2017. It was reported in early February 2017 that 12,000 tweets had called for Trump's assassination since his inauguration. 10. California GOP Representative Tom McClintock had to be escorted to his car after a town hall because of angry protesters. The tires of at least 4 vehicles were slashed. Protesters knocked a 71-year-old female staffer for California GOP Representative Dana Rohrabacher unconscious during a protest outside the representative's office. Milo Yiannopoulos' speech at the University of California, Berkeley was canceled after rioters set the campus on fire and threw rocks through windows. Milo tweeted that one of his supporters wearing a Trump hat was thrown to the ground and kicked. 11. March 2017. Unindicted Obamagate co-conspirator Loretta Lynch calls for blood and death in the streets. 12. Democrat vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine's son, Linwood Kaine, was charged with fleeing police on foot, concealing his identity in a public place, and obstructing legal process, after a masked group he was with threw smoke bombs into a pro-Trump rally in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Masked protesters at Middlebury College rushed AEI scholar and political scientist Charles Murray and Professor Allison Stanger, pushing and shoving Murray and grabbing Stranger by her hair and twisting her neck as they were leaving a campus building. Stranger suffered a concussion. Protesters then surrounded the car they got into, rocking it back and forth and jumping on the hood. 13. April 2017. Fears of violent protests shut down Ann Coulter's UC Berkeley speech. Campus police had gathered intel on protesters who were planning to commit violence. David Horowitz's speech at UC Berkeley canceled over threats and fear of riot. 14. A parade in Portland, Oregon, was canceled after threats of violence were made against a Republican organization. May 2017. Democratic fundraisers openly called for the murder of elected Republican officials. Director of BuzzFeed wishes for Donald Trump's murder. 15. CNN host Kathy Griffin posed for a photo and video shoot with an ISIS-style decapitated head of the president. Republican Representative Tom Garrett, his family, and his dog were targeted by a series of repeated death threats deemed credible by authorities. FBI agents arrested a person for threatening to shoot Republican Representative Martha McSally over her support for Trump. 16. Police in Tennessee charged a woman for allegedly trying to run Republican Representative David Kustoff off the road. Police in North Dakota ejected a man after he became physical with Republican Representative Kevin Cramer at a town hall. Rapper Snoop Dogg simulates shooting President Trump in a video. A former professor was arrested after police said they identified him on video beating Trump supporters with a U-shaped bike lock, leaving 3 people with significant injuries. Racist Bernie Sanders supporter murders 2 people in Portland, Oregon. June 2017. Suspicious packages with a white powder and threatening letters were sent to Karen Handel, a GOP congressional candidate, and her neighbors days before a special election 17. An Antifa website encouraged physical violence against Trump supporters, capitalists, and others who hold conservative-leaning views 18. In Indiana, shots were fired at a pickup truck flying a "Make America Great Again" flag on 19. Actor and filmmaker Rob Reiner called for an all-out war against President Trump 20. Marcela Arguello, a writer for Bill Nye's Netflix show, Bill Nye Saves the World, wrote on Twitter that the deaths of a few older conservative white men would be worth it if it led to gun control 21. A self-described progressive Democrat shot a total of 6 people, including 2 congressmen. Even after the shooting, Democrat leaders and liberal media continued to urge violence against elected officials and Trump supporters. Congressman Steve Scalise and 5 others shot by rabid anti-Trump activist and former Bernie Sanders volunteer James Hodgkinson prior to a congressional charitable event. He had a list of names of the Republican lawmakers he wanted to murder 22 just 3 days before the shooting. Huffington Post published an article that called for prosecuting and executing President Trump, saying that impeaching the president was not enough to appease the liberal author 23. During the shooting, Hodgkinson was heard shouting, "This is for healthcare." 24. After the shooting, a Democrat strategist created the hashtag #HuntRepublican Congressman and voiced hate statements against Republicans 25-26. Republican Representative Claudia Tenney received an email threat that read, "1 down, 216 to go," shortly after the shooting at the Republican Congressional Baseball Practice 27. New York Times sponsored a Shakespeare in Park production that features the bloody assassination of the lead character made up in the likeness of President Trump 28. Johnny Depp made jokes about assassinating the president 29. He later apologized. 30 Democrat congressional leaders did not respond to a request to comment on and disavow Depp's comments. 31. Michael Chabon, a novelist who won the Pulitzer Prize, stated his hope that President Trump would suffer from a massive stroke. 32-33. California lawmakers received death threats from left-wing activists after they put on hold plans to institute universal government health care in the state. 34. It was reported that assaults on Border Patrol agents nearly doubled in the first part of 2017 compared to 2016. 35. Former conservative presidential candidate in France, a woman, was left knocked out and unconscious in the street by a male opposition supporter while campaigning in French parliamentary elections. 36-37. The Austrian government reported left-wing violence increased 112% over the past year. 38.